Hello everyone and welcome to this pre-recorded lesson on what a good letter looks like at GCSE. This is going to be helpful for AQA English Language Paper 2. Hopefully you're joining me straight from the Do It Now that we've done today, but if not, welcome to those of you that are joining us later. So today we're going to look at two examples of a letter to a response to a GCSE task. We're going to look at mainly what's good about these examples so that you can include these good parts when we write our own letters later on this week. We're also going to take a look at some of the bits that could be improved about one of the letters, but mainly we're going to keep it positive and we're going to see if we can pick out some bits and pieces that we can magpie, that we can borrow in our own work. For today's lesson, you'll need a pen and paper, obviously, to make some notes. I'm going to be asking you to pause this video at certain points, reading, making notes and things like that. You'll also have, if you're in my Teams class, two letter examples, a pupil A letter and a pupil B letter. You will need access to these. You don't have to print them if you don't want to. If you don't have the capacity to print, you can read them on screen. And if you're struggling to read them on screen, if you've only got one device at home and you want to just keep it on the video, the letters will be up on the screen as well, so it might be better to pause the video when the letter comes up and just have a read before you hear me talking about it. So that's the only things that you'll need today. This is what the question looks like. This is not actually the example question that we're going to look at today because it's a made-up one that I've made myself. But you are given 45 minutes on the question. You are given 40 marks for this question, or you will be awarded some of 40 marks for this question, and you're advised to start planning before you write. We know that that's what it looks like. We've covered this before in our lessons previously. You also know that this is the full range of success criteria for the task. Now, we're not going to focus on all of this today. We're going to focus only on the mark out of 24, which is basically the top 7 pieces of success criteria on this list. So the only things we'll be focusing on today are the tone and register, the language devices, a clear structure to the writing, use of paragraphs, linking the writing together, suiting the task, and sophisticated vocabulary. When you put all those together into a mark scheme that a teacher could use, it would look something like this. Now this looks pretty complicated at the moment to you guys, I bet. Don't worry about it though. You're not really going to need to use this particular grid. I'm going to break it down for you into easy to remember parts. So you can see across the top you've got two kind of big boxes. They separate out each of the skills. The first one is content and the second one is organization. You can see those there. Essentially, the skills go like this. They go down the page like this. So in content, we've got the register and the purpose. So that means, have you written something, or does your task suit what you were asked to do? So if you were asked to write to a friend, does it sound in your writing like you are writing to a friend? If you were asked to write to an MP, does it sound like you were asked? Does it sound like you've written like to an MP? The purpose is the same thing. If you were asked to argue your case, does your writing sound more like an argument? Whereas if you were asked to just give advice, does it sound like you're giving advice? So you have to keep those in mind as you're writing. The second one is your use of language. Now this is where things like deforest come in. I know we've done some work previously on anecdotes and obviously things like vocabulary as well. So making sure you use the best words for the situation, making sure you use some language devices, but that you vary these. You don't just use the same one over and over. The second part of AO5 is your organisation, and this is mainly structure. And you can see here there's two boxes highlighted. Use of structural features, that's your paragraphs, your introduction and your conclusion that we covered last week, and your ability to join these together with discourse markers, connectives and things like that. Finally, within organisation, we have the range of ideas, so you need to be coming up with at least 3 or 4 ideas and not just sticking to one, and these need to be fully developed as well. Okay, so those are the 4 or 5 areas that we're looking at marking today, and you can see from the column on the left that there's a mark out of 24 for this. We're not going to worry today about the mark out of 16 for SPAG. We're going to come to that at a later date. Don't forget that you can pause and rewind this video if you'd like to go over anything that I've said already. When we come to marking, as examiners and as teachers, we have 4 bands to put you in. And you can see down the left here that you've got upper level 1 and lower level 1. You've got the same for level 2, level 3 and level 4. Now there are descriptors for each of these bands, and they run from limited, which is level 1, up to some, so some skills, some understanding, some techniques shown for level 2, to clear for level 3, so clear and consistent. You can see the word consistent appears quite often in that column, in that row, sorry. Clear and consistent for level 3, up to convincing, compelling, or even sophisticated for level 4. If you wanted to make that really straightforward, you might just say level 1 is it's meh, level 2 is okay, level 3 is good, and level 4 is very good. Alright? So here's your first task. I want you to take a look at pupil A's work. I want you to read the whole response first, and if you've printed it, you might want to highlight certain bits that you think are good, and you might want to take a few notes, maybe borrow a few ideas on things that you think pupil A has done well. I am going to pick out in a second a few bits that pupil A has done well, as well as maybe a couple that could be improved, but like I said earlier, we're going to be positive here, we're just going to look at the good bits. Then I want you to give pupil A a mark, and you might want to rewind the video so you can see the mark scheme. You can either give them a mark between 1 and 6 if you think pupil A has shown you limited skills in terms of their writing skills, between 7 and 12 for some skills, 13 and 18 for clear and consistent, or 19 to 24 if you think they're sophisticated. I'll leave it down to you to figure out really for yourself like what mark within each of those bands you want to give out. If you think it's very, very clear but not quite sophisticated, then you might go for a mark towards the top of that band, whereas if you think that there's only a few things in there that are clear, then you might give it a mark towards the bottom of that band. So pause the video here, have a read of the text, make a few notes on what's good about it, maybe highlight if you've printed it off, and then play the rest of the video and I'll talk you through it. So, pupil A opens with "to whom it may concern." That's good. You'll notice that, like I said earlier, this task is not the one that was on the screen. That was on cars and pollution. This one is a task that was writing a letter to the sport minister arguing for or against hosting the Olympics in your local area. And this is a task that you are going to write your own answer to later on this week. Like I said, "to whom it may concern" looks like a letter, so it follows the form that you're given, and then it opens. I'm writing to say that I do not want us to host the Olympics, and there's a little bit of an introduction there. Hosting the Olympics doesn't bring any benefit to our country. That works. It's nicely structured. It's okay for its structure. There could be a little bit more detail in the introduction in terms of just summarising a few more of the ideas, but it's okay. Further down, we've got "research shows that 80% of our local trees will have to be cut down." This is okay, it's use of statistics. I'm not quite sure I buy that statistic. I don't think that any Olympics being hosted in a country or an area is going to result in nearly 90% of the trees being cut down. And I think we've discussed in lesson, haven't we, that if you're going to use a statistic, it has to be believable. Remember, the top level of this mark scheme is called convincing, and I'm not quite convinced by this one. Then I've highlighted something in red. Now, research also shows. I think this pupil is relying too heavily on statistics, and I think if you keep repeating statistics, it kind of loses its impact. So maybe just one well-chosen statistic would be better than wedging too many in. We've then got another yellow bit. This is a good bit. Another reason. So this pupil is using connectives to join their ideas together. So they've got a little bit of fluency between their ideas there. You can't argue with that, can you? It's a rhetorical question, but this task was write to the Minister for Sport, and that needs to be a little bit more formal than this. Now, I'm not saying that you can't use rhetorical questions at all, but this kind of sounds like this person is writing to a friend or to someone in a more informal way, and I'm not sure that rhetorical question really fits the bill there. So this pupil might get a mark or two for using a rhetorical question, but it's not quite convincing me that this is the right one for the situation that they were given. And then towards the end of the letter, we have a little bit of a conclusion. a couple more ideas there. So there are a range of ideas in the letter, a little bit of a conclusion, but I've highlighted it red here because it doesn't really look like the conclusion that I taught you to use last week. It's not too developed there, but we do have kind regards and Tara Thomas. It's signed off as if it is a letter. There's a better way to sign off for a letter, but we'll see that in pupil B. So if you haven't already given this letter a score, please give it a score now before I turn the slide over and reveal what it really got when it was marked as an exam piece. So this pupil scored in upper level 2 for the mark out of 24 here. There are some sustained use of skills. There are some structural features in there. There are some linguistic devices. Not a massive range, but some, and they are used pretty effectively. They're not clearly effective, and they're certainly not convincing, but there are some linguistic features in there. So this pupil would score a mark between 10 and 12. I would probably give them 11, because I think those linguistic devices sometimes can let it down slightly, as well as their use of tone, the correct use of tone for their audience. So there you go, 11 out of 24 for that candidate. Not a total disaster, but there are some things to work on there, certainly for that kid. Your second task is a little bit longer. So pupil B is a longer response to the same question about hosting the Olympics in your local area. I want you to do the same thing again. So think about, as you're reading, write down anything that you think stands out to you as something good, something that you'd pinch, something that you'd steal for your own work, and then give them a mark at the end, something within one of those bands that we've already discussed. Pause the video now, have a read, do some writing, make some notes, and I'll see you for a breakdown of the letter in a minute. So you can see already that this candidate has structured their letter a little bit more effectively than the last one did. Pupil A wrote "to whom it may concern," but pupil B has written a full address out for this letter, as well as starting "Dear Councillor Smith." Now this might get this pupil a couple more marks actually. When you're asked to write a letter, there are a few things in the list of it's basically a checklist really of things to include when you are writing a letter, and address is one of them. So this pupil would already be picking up an extra mark or two for setting it out like a letter. Again, we start with "I'm writing to you to discuss," just like pupil A did, so that's a nicely well structured introduction. There's a little bit more detail here as well in terms of the financials and things like that, and the example about 2012 in their second introduction paragraph. This pupil has clearly written a lot more than pupil A, so the range of ideas is a little bit more there. And the difference between pupil A and pupil B, I think, is that there are several examples here of this pupil using their own local area. So this pupil is using Saltash as their examples to put Saltash on the map. They also use this anecdote about visiting an Olympic stadium when on holiday in Barcelona. And like I said to you last week in our previous lesson, an anecdote, a personal story, even if it is made up, is a perfect way to get in a little bit of personality into your writing. So this person's done this quite well here. There's a reference to Jack's Gym, and there's a reference to a few real life examples here. Torval and Dean, Tom Daly from Plymouth's Life Centre. They're all Olympic heroes who trained in their local areas. Now these are a little bit more convincing in terms of factual examples than the statistics that pupil A used. So it may be that you don't know of any examples of Olympic heroes, but that doesn't mean that you can't still make your statistics or your facts a little bit more convincing than pupil A did. There's quite a lot here. Obviously there would be lots and lots of things to pick out from this letter. I haven't highlighted anything yellow on this one in the interest of time, but there are some things here that you could pause, take a look at, maybe take some notes on. And then at the end we've got a better conclusion. So pupil B here has started their conclusion paragraph with "just imagine it," this imperative phrase that ends with a colon. They're trying to make the Minister for Sport imagine the outcome of hosting the Olympics in Britain again. And that's really persuasive. If anything's going to get this man to see sense and to host the Olympics here again, it's going to be this paragraph here, which gives us such a positive image of hosting the Olympics again. There's then a brief thank you, because obviously this is a formal letter and you should thank whoever you are writing to for taking the time to read it. And then the sign off, yours faithfully, is correct for the context of the letter. The rule for signing off a letter, that you might have been taught this at primary school actually, is never sincerely for sir. Okay, so you always use sincerely if you do know their name, and faithfully if you don't. And this one for the Minister of Transport is faithfully. Patricia Chambers, obviously a fake name for this letter. So if you haven't already, please pause the video, and then we'll come back here and we'll take a look at the marks in a second. So you might have already guessed, but this pupil receives top marks. There's nothing really in the writing that pupil has produced that we could take marks away for at GCSE level. It's not a perfect piece of work. There are still some things in there that I think that pupil could do with even getting rid of. There's possibly too much in there, but what they've got is certainly convincing, it's compelling, sophisticated use of vocabulary and language devices, and it's structured in a very fluent and effective way. So 24 marks out of 24 for that pupil. So your final task for the day is just to sit and reflect and make some notes in preparation for our next lesson together, when I'm going to start by putting these 3 questions back on the board. So I want you to make some notes now, based on the annotations or based on any notes that you've made so far. What have you learnt from pupil A about what you could include in your own letter? What should you be doing to pick up marks? And then in contrast, what have you learnt from pupil A about what to avoid? What is there in that letter that we think, no, I really shouldn't be doing that in my GCSE writing? And then from pupil B, similar, what tools, techniques or ideas can we take from them? Is there anything that they've done really successfully that you think you could incorporate into your own piece of writing next lesson? Make sure you keep your notes on that handy Year 11, and I will see you for our next lesson later this week.